Let's go down to the Kennedy Space Center and take a look at Challenger sitting on the pad.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
It was 1986, and America gathered around their TVs, eager to watch the Challenger shuttle touch the sky. A bright plume replaced hope, and stunned silence spread across living rooms and schools. But today we ask, what if everything you thought you knew about that day was wrong? What if the official story only scratched the surface of the truth? And what really caused the Challenger disaster? Ignored warnings and the fatal flaw. It was January 1986, and Florida was cold in a way that made engineers nervous. The morning of the launch, frost clung to the launch pad, and the air felt sharp enough to bite your skin. Temperatures had dropped to around 36 degrees Fahrenheit, a rare chill for Cape Canaveral. And it was the coldest weather for any shuttle launch in NASA's history. Inside the offices of Morton Thiokol, engineers huddled around speakerphones, their voices tense as they spoke with NASA managers. One engineer, Roger Boisjoli, warned that the cold would stiffen the rubber O-rings on the shuttle's solid rocket boosters, making them lose flexibility, and that this could prevent them from sealing properly. He knew that without a perfect seal, hot gases could leak through the rocket joints, leading to a catastrophic failure. Boisjoli's warning was clear. He told them, the result could be a catastrophe of the highest order, loss of human life. However, the launch was already delayed, and NASA's management faced intense public and political pressure to get Challenger in the air. There were schoolchildren across America waiting to watch Krista McAuliffe, the first teacher set to fly in space, and delaying the launch again felt like a blow to the agency's image. NASA's managers pushed back on the engineers, asking for data that did not exist rather than listening to the engineers' concerns. Engineers at Thiokol were urged to reconsider their objections. In a call that would later haunt them, Thiokol's management reversed the engineers' recommendation and told NASA to go ahead. The launch would proceed on the coldest morning in shuttle history. The O-ring was a simple piece of rubber, but it was responsible for sealing the sections of the solid rocket boosters, keeping the burning gases from escaping. On a warm day, the O-rings would flex and create a tight seal, but in freezing temperatures, the rubber would harden and lose elasticity, creating tiny gaps. It only took one of these gaps to let hot gases escape, creating a flame that could burn through the booster's casing and ignite the external fuel tank. Physicist Richard Feynman, who joined the Rogers Commission investigating the disaster, demonstrated this flaw in a way that cut through the technical jargon. In a televised moment, Feynman dipped a piece of the O-ring material into a glass of ice water, showing how the rubber lost its flexibility when cold. Holding up the hardened rubber, he said, "I believe that has some significance for our problem." During the launch, just 73 seconds after liftoff, a puff of black smoke appeared near the right solid rocket booster, exactly where engineers had feared the O-ring would fail. A flame escaped, and it struck the massive external fuel tank. The hydrogen fuel ignited, creating a fireball that tore the Challenger apart in front of the eyes of millions, including classrooms filled with children who were watching live, expecting to see a moment of triumph. What is striking about this tragedy is how it wasn't simply an engineering accident, but a management culture failure. NASA had developed a belief that they could manage risks by pushing the limits of the shuttle's safety margins to maintain the launch schedule. They saw previous launches with minor O-ring erosion as proof that the system could tolerate it. But in truth, each launch was a roll of the dice, and on that freezing January morning, the gamble failed. The Challenger disaster is often remembered for its bright plume in the sky and the loss of 7 astronauts, but behind that image lies a story of warnings ignored and decisions made under pressure. It is a reminder that even the most advanced technology can fail if those in charge stop listening to the people who understand the risks best. Should NASA have delayed the launch that day? Should the engineers have fought harder to stop it? Or was the pressure too great for anyone to stand in the way? But here's the thing, most people think the Challenger was destroyed instantly in an explosion. But that's not what really happened. The truth about what took place in those 73 seconds and what happened to the crew is even more shocking. And it changes how we see this tragedy forever. the myth of the explosion and instant death. People remember a bright fireball in the sky on that January morning in 1986. They remember the silence that followed as smoke trails twisted above Cape Canaveral, and parents turned off TVs while teachers pulled blinds down in classrooms. Everyone thought they had just seen an explosion, a violent instant that took the lives of 7 astronauts. But that is not exactly what happened. The Challenger did not explode in the way most people imagine. It was not a fiery bomb in the sky, but a structural breakup caused by a leaking fuel tank. When the right solid rocket booster's flame burned through the external tank, the massive hydrogen fuel chamber lost integrity. It collapsed, tearing apart the shuttle, which was still traveling at over 1,500 miles per hour, 15 kilometers above the Atlantic Ocean. The breakup looked like an explosion, but technically, it was the rapid release of liquid propellant turning into gas, tearing apart the shuttle in mid-air. The solid rocket boosters themselves did not disintegrate. They continued flying, spiraling wildly until NASA's range safety officers sent a command to detonate them remotely to prevent them from crashing into populated areas. This alone is one of the most shocking parts of the Challenger disaster. Pieces of the vehicle kept moving long after the breakup, scattering debris across the ocean. And then there is what happened to the crew. NASA's official statement has often said the exact cause and time of death for the Challenger's crew cannot be positively determined. However, the evidence suggests something that many find deeply unsettling. When the shuttle broke apart, the crew cabin detached from the orbiter intact. It did not explode. It fell for more than 2 minutes, descending from 15 kilometers above the ocean, slamming into the Atlantic at more than 200 miles per hour. Inside that cabin, it is very likely that the crew was alive for a portion of the fall. Several pieces of evidence point to this. Some of the astronauts' personal emergency oxygen packs had been activated, including the one worn by pilot Michael Smith, suggesting he was conscious long enough to turn it on manually. The crew's personal packs could supply only a few minutes of breathable air, but they were not pressurized. So if the cabin had depressurized during breakup, the crew would have lost consciousness quickly from lack of oxygen. Recovery teams found the crew cabin on the ocean floor weeks later. It had shattered on impact with the sea, and the investigation teams described the condition of the remains carefully, using cautious words. One diver who worked on the recovery would later say, "They were not alive when we found them, but they were alive when they left the pad." This is one of those parts of the Challenger story that NASA never emphasized. They did not lie, but they chose to let the public believe the comforting version, that the astronauts died instantly in a heroic flash, instead of possibly being conscious, aware, and powerless during a 2-minute freefall toward the ocean. Richard Feynman, who had shown the O-ring losing flexibility in ice water during the hearings, was among those who wanted the truth out in the open. He believed that honesty in science and engineering is more important than protecting reputations or preserving comforting illusions. The real story is not about an instant death. It is about how a combination of engineering failures and organizational pressures led to a tragedy that may have left 7 astronauts alive and aware as they fell 12 miles down toward the Atlantic. NASA has never officially confirmed exactly what the crew experienced in those final moments. Maybe they did not want to force that image onto the public, or maybe they wanted to preserve the image of the crew's courage, untarnished by the horror of those final minutes. However, the question remains, why would NASA downplay the reality of crew survival during the Challenger disaster? Was it to protect the families from additional grief, or to shield the agency from the outrage that might follow if people understood how close those astronauts came to surviving, only to be failed by a preventable disaster? What do you think? Should NASA have told the public everything, even if it hurt more? And here is something even more hidden from the public eye. The Challenger's remains were not just lost forever in the sea. They were recovered, studied, and stored. And some say there is more to that story than NASA has shared. What happened to the wreckage, and what secrets might it still hold? The cover-up. what NASA didn't want you to know. After the Challenger fell from the sky in January of 1986, waves rolled across the Atlantic carrying fragments of metal, insulation, and dreams that had been launched with hope only moments earlier. The world watched as recovery teams set out into the ocean to find what was left. However, what they found was not what NASA wanted the world to see. Divers discovered the crew compartment resting on the ocean floor. It had broken open on impact, but parts remained hauntingly intact. Helmets still held pieces of ears and scalp. Some seat restraints were still secured, showing that crew members remained strapped in, waiting in those final moments. However, as these discoveries came in, NASA's approach shifted. They moved quickly to control the narrative, managing what the public would know and what would remain hidden. The Miami Herald's Dennis E. Powell began pulling at the threads of this quiet secrecy. His reporting found that NASA staff, including those working closely with the families, were encouraged to maintain a careful script, avoiding any mention of the condition of the remains or details about the crew's final moments. Powell's investigations showed that some at NASA worried about the family's pain. In contrast, others feared how the public might react if the truth came out. Imagine working in the recovery team, seeing helmets with clear evidence that the crew did not die instantly, only to be told to say nothing. It was not just about protecting the families. There was a fear of backlash, lawsuits, and shattered trust in an agency that promised safety and adventure. NASA, already under fire for ignoring engineering concerns, now faced a deeper ethical conflict: protect its public image, or tell the whole truth, no matter how painful. The New York Times later reported that NASA's internal culture pushed some employees to downplay or avoid sharing the worst details with families and the media. During anniversary remembrances, official coverage spoke of bravery and the tragedy of the Challenger. But few of these events ever addressed the reality that the crew likely lived, conscious during the fall, only to die from oxygen deprivation before impact. It was an institutional decision, one layered in the fear of what complete transparency might do to NASA's already battered reputation. In the 1980s, spaceflight was a symbol of national pride, and the Challenger disaster was a national wound. The truth about the crew's condition and survival was a scab that NASA, and by extension the government, did not want to pick open on live television or in public hearings. Was this a conspiracy? Or was it simply the institution's instinct to protect itself while claiming it was protecting the families? Perhaps it was both. Documents, interviews, and testimonies collected later suggest that while some inside NASA were desperate to be transparent, the larger system moved to keep details locked away, letting the myth of instant death replace the horror of a 2-minute fall into darkness. In one of his articles, Dennis E. Powell pointed out that official NASA channels would say the cause of death could not be determined, but internal documents and first-hand accounts suggested a clearer story. The crew, strapped in, conscious, falling, was a reality too heavy for the morning news. It was easier for NASA to let people believe the astronauts died in an instant blaze, heroes in a flash, rather than victims of a failure they saw coming. And it leaves us with a question that reaches beyond the Challenger. How do institutions handle tragedies when the truth could shake public trust? Do we deserve every detail, no matter how heavy? Or do we accept that sometimes the story we are given is edited for our comfort and maybe for theirs? What do you think? Should NASA have told everything to the families and the world, or was protecting them from those images the right call? But what happened to the Challenger itself? Some wreckage was recovered, studied, and quietly stored away, but not everything was found. What remains of the Challenger today, and what secrets might still be resting beneath the waves? The lost wreckage and lingering mysteries. In the winter sun of January 1986, the Challenger rose into the sky, leaving behind a trail of white that curled above the Atlantic. When the shuttle broke apart, pieces fell for miles, splashing into the cold sea that waited below. Recovery ships launched within hours, racing to gather what they could, lifting twisted metal and charred fragments from the waves. Yet, even after months of searching, more than half of the Challenger remained hidden beneath the ocean. Divers marked coordinates and guided cranes to pull up landing gear and heavy panels. They brought up the crew cabin, still recognizable in parts, and they recovered helmets, flight manuals, and pieces of the rocket boosters. Yet the sea held on to the rest. It was as if the Atlantic became a second grave, one that refused to give back all that it had taken. Years passed, and the story of Challenger turned into a memorial, its pieces stored quietly in silos near Kennedy Space Center. But the ocean's secrets remained untouched until 2022, when a documentary team stumbled upon something unexpected. While filming off the coast of Florida for a different story, they noticed a large man-made structure resting on the seabed. It was covered in sand and marine growth, but the edges and shape were unmistakable. It was a piece of Challenger lying quietly in the dark, waiting to be seen. NASA confirmed the discovery, adding it to their records, but even now, they estimate that about 40% of the shuttle's remains are still out there, scattered in the sand, held in canyons of silt and coral, far from the reach of divers and cameras. This physical loss mirrors the loss of transparency that followed the disaster. Parts of the story, like the wreckage, were kept out of view, hidden under layers of public relations and official statements that smoothed over the rough edges of what really happened that day. When we think about the Challenger, we remember the plume of smoke in the sky, the shocked faces of families watching from the ground, and the words of President Reagan that night. We don't see the pieces still lying beneath the waves, pieces that might still hold answers to questions no one has asked in years. We don't see the logs and recordings, the data that might show exactly what the crew experienced in those final moments as they fell 12 miles toward the sea. There is a haunting quiet around the Challenger's missing parts, as if they are waiting for someone to come back for them, to lift them into the sun once more and ask the questions that were left unspoken. What stories would those pieces tell if they were found tomorrow? What would we learn about the Challenger's final seconds, and what would it change about how we see the mission and its crew? It makes you wonder what else is out there, waiting to be discovered, not just in the ocean, but in the archives, in sealed boxes and reports marked confidential, in conversations that were never recorded. Sometimes, history hides in plain sight, and sometimes it sinks to the bottom of the ocean, waiting for the day when someone is ready to see it. What do you think might still be hidden in the wreckage of the Challenger? Do you believe there are answers lying beneath those waves, or are there truths that will stay silent forever? But what happened after Challenger fell? How did this disaster change NASA? And what did it mean for the future of space travel and every mission that came after? The Challenger disaster's impact. The morning Challenger fell, America paused. That day, it left more than debris on the Atlantic waves. It left a question that echoed in every conversation about space. What went wrong, and how do we prevent it from happening again? In the months that followed, the Presidential Commission, known as the Rogers Commission, examined every piece of the wreckage and every decision made in the days leading up to the launch. They called for changes in NASA's management structure, stricter engineering oversight, and the establishment of an Office of Safety, Reliability, and Quality Assurance to ensure technical voices could never again be ignored. Engineers who had tried to warn of the risks before launch became symbols of the quiet power of whistleblowing, showing how a single voice could carry the weight of lives and history if only someone would listen. NASA changed how it approached risk, taking a culture that once saw safety as a checkbox and transforming it into a conversation at every level, from engineers to mission control. But the Challenger also left a deeper imprint, shaping how the public viewed space travel, replacing boundless optimism with a sober respect for the dangers that came with leaving Earth. What lessons from Challenger do you think matter most today? Let me know in the comments, and let's see how we continue to learn from history's hardest moments.